Hey everyone, so this is Frank. Frank's going to help us out here in a second. First I want to talk about how blood moves through the body. So when blood's in the body, it returns to the heart via the veins. Okay, and it's going to return here at the right atrium, and then it's going to get pumped down into the right ventricle. I'm going to leave out the atria for now because I want to focus on the parts of the heart that pump blood out of the heart. Right, so we have the right ventricle, and blood moves up into the lungs. Right, so from the right ventricle up into the lungs. From the lungs, it moves back down to the left atrium and then to the left ventricle. And at the left ventricle, that blood's going to get pumped out into the body via the arteries. So this is the flow from veins to the heart to the lungs to the left side of the heart out into the arteries. So the blood here is full of CO2, which is a waste product. We're trying to get that waste out of the body. And on the left side of the heart, we have blood that's full of oxygen, which is energy. We're trying to get that energy into the body. So let's say we have a bad pump here. Say our left ventricle is not working so well. All right, so what's going to happen? We're going to have problems downstream, right in front of the problem. This is downstream. And those problems are going to have to do with the fact that this pump is not getting enough blood out into the body. So that's our little arrow here. So if we're not getting enough blood out into the body, it means that the body's not getting enough oxygen. When the body doesn't get enough oxygen, we feel fatigue. Right? So difficulty carrying out the task that we normally carry out because we just feel tired. We're not getting the energy that we need because the heart is not working as well. So that's downstream. Let's talk about what's going on upstream. Oops, excuse me, Frank. Frank got a little bit of a haircut there. It's all right. It looked like he kind of needed a haircut. So this is upstream. And upstream, the main problem is we have congestion. Right? We have blood that's not able to move through the circuit as well as it normally was able to move through because this left ventricle is lagging behind. It's not able to carry its load. All right? So we're going to have congestion in this whole part behind the problem, in the veins and the lungs and so on. So we're going to break up this whole upstream situation into two parts. We're going to talk about the lungs first. So let's take a look at the lungs. So in the lungs, we have these little workhorses called the alveoli. The alveoli is where we do our gas exchange. It's where we get CO2, where we get carbon dioxide out, and where we get oxygen in. So these alveoli are surrounded by little capillaries like that. So we get our CO2 out that moves out, and we get our O2 in that moves in. All right, so what happens when someone is suffering from heart failure is that you get congestion, right? We're saying this pump is not working as well as it was normally working, which means that blood's going to back up, it's going to back up, and it's going to back up into the lungs, right? Through the atria, through this vein, and then back up into the lungs. And then back up into these capillaries. And what happens when you have blood backed up into the capillaries is that some of that fluid that backs up is going to make its way out of the capillary. And when it moves out of the capillary, it starts filling up this interstitial space. And it starts increasing the distance between the capillary and the alveoli. And when this distance is increased, the diffusion that happens here, the movement of gases from the alveoli to the capillaries, is slowed down. It's made less efficient, which means that you're not going to be able to get as much oxygen as you want, and you're not going to get rid of as much CO2 as you used to be able to. So this is going to result in shortness of breath. Okay, all of the respiratory problems, or most of the respiratory problems that are associated with heart failure result from the fact that you're increasing this interstitial space here. So there are a couple of unique examples of shortness of breath that are particular to heart failure. So let's talk about paroxysmal, nocturnal, so occurring at night, nocturnal, dyspnea. Dyspnea means difficulty breathing. The difficulty breathing, as we said, happens at night, and paroxysmal means that it happens quickly. It's quickly onset. So what happens is the heart, I was pointing over here, there's nothing over here. So the heart here slows down at night because the central nervous system is telling it, hey, you don't have to work as hard. We're not building cabinets or anything, we're just sleeping. So that's all well and good if you don't have heart failure, but if you do, you want your heart working at full power all of the time. And when the central nervous system tells the heart that it can slow down, you start getting congestion, which increases this interstitial space because of the fluid that moves into this interstitial space. That makes diffusion more difficult, so it becomes harder to breathe. Okay, another type of breathing-related problem occurs when you lie down. You become short of breath when you lie down. And this happens for a unique reason. So let's say that we have a vein in the leg and it's carrying blood back up to the right atrium there. Okay, so this blood, when someone is standing up, has to work against gravity all the way up here, right? But when we're lying down, we don't have to work against gravity. That blood's going to be able to make its way back up to the heart much more easily than it would be when we were standing. That's what's going on with orthopnea, is when we lie down, that blood takes such an easy path to get back to the heart. A lot of blood ends up coming back to the heart and overwhelms the pump that's not working really well. So you overwhelm the pump, some of that blood makes its way back up into the lungs, causing this type of congestion, which messes up our diffusion. It makes it hard to breathe. So orthopnea is difficulty breathing when you lie down. Paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea is difficulty breathing when you are asleep, right, in the middle of the night because of your central nervous system. So the last thing we worry about is hemorrhage, pulmonary hemorrhage to be exact. Let's say pulmonary. So what happens is you have so much congestion in these capillaries that you can get these little breaks and fluid starts moving out. Right? So you basically just don't want fluid moving out of the blood vessels. It's generally problematic, but especially you don't want the blood vessels to break. Right? So that's what's going on in the lungs. We'll label this 2 here for clarity. So let's talk about the veins. What's going on in the venous backup because of heart failure? So let's start with Frank's big old brain here. So his big old brain has a bunch of blood in it, and that blood makes its way back to the heart via the jugular vein. The jugular vein is that vein that pops out of your neck when you're really scared or you're really stressed out or really mad. So normally when people have a healthy heart, that jugular is hard to see. But when you have venous backup due to heart failure, more fluid ends up staying in that jugular, and that jugular becomes distended. And distended simply means that that jugular is sort of popping out of the neck. So if someone's just sitting there, you'll be able to see their jugular if they're experiencing heart failure. And that's because you have all this fluid backed up into the jugular. So let's go down here and look at our leg vein. So in our leg vein, here we go. And we're going to draw our vein here. So in our vein, we have some fluid. Frank has yellow fluid, okay? So if we have venous backup, it means that fluid is staying in this vein. It's building up. So let's say we have more fluid here, right? And if enough fluid makes its way into the vein, it stays there. Eventually, there's going to be enough pressure to push it out into the tissue. Right? When it moves out into the tissue, it's going to cause the area around where it's moving out to swell. Okay, so this usually happens in the legs and the lower extremities because, again, we're working against gravity. So gravity's pushing blood down here. So when this venous backup causes swelling in the legs because fluid is moving out into the tissue, we call it edema. All right, and edema is pretty obvious. The leg is going to look much more swollen than it normally is, or the ankles. Basically, the lower extremities are more susceptible to this. And another interesting thing about edema is that you can press down on the skin that's experiencing edema, and your fingerprint will stay in the skin for a little bit. It sort of looks like a memory foam mattress pad, if you've ever seen that. Your imprint stays into the skin for longer, and that's because we have fluid that's on the tissue here. All right. Finally, let's talk about what happens to blood that comes from the organs and is making its way back up to the heart. So again, the same theme. We have blood that's backing up in the veins because we have a problem in the heart. So blood is going to back up into the veins that were leading from the organs to the heart, and it's going to cause those organs to look a little bigger than they normally are. So if you do a physical examination, you might be able to feel these organs underneath the skin a little more, they're a little larger than they normally would be. Right, so that's a sign that you have venous backup into the organs, like the liver. This is the liver here, and the spleen.